Lobo's in the kitchen. Robin's in the hall. Joker's in the bathroom. I'm peeing on the wall. Penguin's in the potty. His arm's too short to wipe. Catwoman's in the litter box. And Riddler smokes a pipe.
Oh, jingle bells, Batman smells, Robin laid an egg. The Batmobile lost a wheel and Joker got away. Oh, jingle bells, the Batman smells, Robin laid an egg. The Batmobile lost a wheel and Joker got away. Scarecrow's on the run.
All right, and we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Christmas episode. Yeah, it's not Christmas yet, but we're recording just a week ahead of time for Christmas. Going to be dropping next Monday, the 25th. Source Material brings to you a extra special holiday-themed episode where we're going to talk some comic books off of a list. That's right. We checked out a list and we're going to see how things stack up here, because what I found was a list called, it's Comics Alliance 12 Comics of Christmas, DC Comics' best holiday specials. So now, usually when a holiday special would show up, it was rare that I picked something up. I remember having the Punisher Christmas special. I think I may have read that once. That wasn't something that I always got a hold of, but these things have been around for a while. The holidays show up and you want to tell a nice little Christmas tale. So joining me this evening, a couple very special guests here. Nobody a stranger to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, that's for sure. These guys have got some podcast experience behind them, and I can't wait to bring them on here. And also, the holidays hit, Halloween hit, and there might have been an absence. There might have been a peculiar absence that occurred where I just didn't have the opportunity to do a podcast with a certain someone I have done a podcast with on Halloween for the last, 3 years, 2 years, something like that. And that is one Gavin Napier. Gavin Napier, thanks for coming on to Source Material. It may not be Halloween, but maybe the second best holiday of the year.
Yeah. I mean, a holiday's a holiday. And we've got some plans for upcoming horror topics such as Lord Pumpkin, a couple that I've sent your way. And I have faith that we'll maybe do some double time next year around Halloween.
Sounds great, man. I look forward to that. And our second guest right here on Source Material, he's been on here before. He helped me do a blow-by-blow description of Superman versus Doomsday. Yeah, you can go back. That was a while back, maybe over a year since we did that. That's Pat Mullen. Pat Mullen, you ready to talk some DC Comics holiday specials tonight, buddy?
I am more than ready. I'm excited. I'm the biggest Grinch in the world, but you know what? Comic books can turn my frown upside down real quick.
I hear you, man. And DC Comics, we're all familiar with DC Comics and their superheroes. This hit me all of a sudden out of the blue one day. I like doing like random comic reviews. I used to do that on Periscope. I'd pull up a random comic, review it. So I found this list about these holiday specials, 12 of them off of this list. And so the main thing I had to do is, number one, make sure we had access to them. Unfortunately, there was only 9 that really we could get our hands on, because I did a check on all 12. 3 of them I came up short, didn't have easy access to. That makes it easy. We got 3 people on this podcast. We'll do a division of 3, and I gave each one of these guys 3 comics. Now, we divided up randomly, so we saw the list, but I was the guy that held the key as to who gets what issue. And I just made these guys pick a number. They picked a number, and then I told them which one they got. We'll give a short description of the ones that we liked, if you want to. If you guys want to give your best short summary of the ones that didn't make the top of the list. So in other words, we each picked one of those 3 to bring to the table to be like, okay, check this one out. If you have the opportunity, maybe this is the one you want to check out. Hopefully something like that struck a chord. It may not have. There's a very good possibility that all 3 were trashed, because I have no idea which ones got which and quality of these in any way. I'm not a big DC reader. We know who the Flash is. We know who Superman is. We know who Batman is. We're kind of versed in who these guys are. So that's going to be the focus of tonight. But before we get into all that, we did have one other DC comic that I want to talk about, and that is Lobo Paramilitary Christmas Special. Pat, now why in the world? Why this one?
I got this comic probably back around sometime in 96 or 97, randomly in just a random gaggle of issues that I had. I don't know where this idea came from or whatever, but whenever I'm told about a Christmas issue of a comic, this is the one that comes to mind. And it's just so ridiculous, so great, so out of place that you can't really describe it accurately unless you read it or see the fan-made movie that was made out of it. It was a student film made for somebody's senior thesis that they put together on a budget of $2,500 and actually got Andrew Bryniarski, who a lot of people will know from movies like either The Program, he plays Leatherface in the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he's in Any Given Sunday. He's a big, generic, jacked-up guy, and he plays Lobo, and the makeup is fantastic. It basically captures the issue really well in terms of like just the ridiculous nature of it, the parody nature, the bloodshed. Yeah, it was all in one, pretty fun.
Gavin, Lobo, you got any preconceived notions? You ever read much of this guy?
Yeah, I actually like Lobo a lot. He was originally pitched as something of a parody of how violent and over-the-top comics were becoming, and because of that nature, Lobo could be very entertaining. He could be very funny at times. The problem is with Lobo came when people tried to write him seriously and treat him as a serious comic book character. He is well established as a very powerful figure, and I guess by the nature of the fact that he's a bounty hunter, I guess he's technically a villain. But if you compare Lobo and his origin to some different characters throughout all of comics, you'll notice that he's taking jabs at several different icons in the Marvel universe, two in particular. One, when you look at his appearance, his physical appearance with the wild hair and the black around the eyes, and the fact that he refers to himself as the main man. He's this cigar chomping, bike riding guy. He's poking a little bit of fun there at Wolverine. Mm-hmm. But you also look at his origin, which I don't know how familiar you are with Lobo's origin, but essentially he killed everyone on his planet, including all of the gods and all of the angels that they worship, which is a ridiculous parody of the origin of Thanos. Mm-hmm. So you have this character that is designed to poke fun at two of the heavy hitters in Marvel. One is Marvel's flavor of the week every single week of their existence, and the other is this Jim Starlin created cosmic powerhouse with a very dark origin, and DC's like, okay, let's just make fun of both of them. So you have Lobo, and he has made friends with dolphins. He has gone toe-to-toe with Superman. He has a dog that I don't know why a spaceman has a bulldog, but he does.
He does.
But, Lobo can be fun when written well, and the Lobo Paramilitary Christmas special is an example of everything that Lobo should be.
Oh, yeah. I'll quickly hop in here and just kind of summarize the story. That way the listeners have an idea of what occurred in this thing. And let me tell you, it's just insanity almost like right from the start. When there's this couple, they're worried as the husband has lost his job right before Christmas. The problem is that they don't have gifts for their children. Now, they're worried about this, as many parents would be. However, the reason they are worried about this is the fact that apparently their kids have very severe violent tendencies, to which there has been problems in the past where kids have not gotten a present and they've maimed or did something to their parents. And I don't know if that's just a concept on this world that they're on or what, but it's bad. It's bad. So they're kind of at they're struggling here. What are they going to do? So luckily there's a knock at the door. They open the door and there sits a book. And on this book, it tells this tale that would hopefully, if they could tell this tale to the kids, it might put them on the right path, straighten them out a little bit so they don't unleash their wrath upon their parents when there's no gifts under the tree. And this book tells a tale of Lobo, the main man, being contracted by the Easter Bunny to kill Santa Claus. Now, yeah, that's right. So the Santa Claus in this book is not the Jolly Santa that we all know and love here on Earth. No, this is Chris I think it's Crusher Kringle, who keeps his elves working tirelessly like slaves and makes sure to keep a positive public image by the once a year charity dump that he does that's considered Christmas. He accepts the contract and he's on his way to kill Santa, has to make his way through some elves. You think that's going to be a battle there? That's not the case. When they all show up with guns pointed at the main man himself, and it turns out they're just pop guns. That's right. So Lobo unleashes hell upon these. I mean, it is gruesome. It's not just like, okay, yeah, off panel, there's a shot and you see a splat of blood. No, these elves are losing limbs, half their face. It is bad. So
and I think it's worth pointing out that this is still a time when the comics code was still in effect.
Yeah.
And DC clung to the comics code far longer than any other publisher did. So for them to go with something this over the top and violent, especially for a Christmas issue, was very shocking and very uncharacteristic for DC as a company.
Dude, let me tell you what I was thinking I was getting into here. I thought that, okay, I remember looking at the cover, I think, where Lobo's standing over Santa Claus, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Santa, our good friend that brings us presents, and Lobo's going to kill him, and Lobo on the cover has already got the better of Santa here. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. So I've already kind of had an idea of what I was going to get into. But then when I opened up the book and we got Crusher Kringle and all this bloody gore violence going on, this was I think it said 1991 on the cover. So it was the end of 91 or the beginning. I can't remember at what point this got released, but it was... It took me by surprise. The thing is that I really liked it. Okay, I was really enjoying it. To give our listeners an idea who the creative team here is probably a couple names you're synonymous with Lobo, and that's Keith Giffen and Simon Beasley. So okay, here we go. Now, so he makes his way through the elves. Gets through those, and of course, he makes his way to Santa's lair. And the final battle with Santa is not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. I sent these guys just a snap of a pic of the page where Lobo and Santa are fighting. I mean, there's one point where Lobo hits Santa, and Santa's eye pops out. It doesn't like fly off. No, it's hanging from his face. It is disgusting. So the battle goes, and when it's all said and done, the main man, Lobo, is the last one standing with a head on his shoulders. Now brace yourselves, because now we have to get ready for Lobo Claus. Lobo decides that, now there's a job opening for Santa Claus, and he takes over the role. His first order of business is to make sure all the children of the earth, or all the children of the planet, receive their Christmas gift on Christmas night. And it just so happens that the naughty or nice list is right there for Lobo to view. And he got everybody on the list. Naughty or nice, you got a gift. And that gift was the same gift, and that was a bomb dropped on your house. So Lobo takes off in the sleigh and drops bombs on every kid on the planet. Merry Christmas to all. So that's the story that this couple was reading. And after they finish the book, they get to the last page and it says, good for one read, and the book promptly disappears. So these parents are again out of luck, just like they were at the beginning. Out of options, the father decides to strike first, grabs his shotgun, and goes and kills all the kids. And that's how we end that Christmas special. Jeez, Pat. Come on, man. How old were you when you read this thing, man?
I got this. I was somewhere between 8 and 9 years old.
Oh, my gosh, dude. Wow.
Yeah. That was quite an introduction to the first real Christmas special comic that I owned. And I had maybe one or two odd issues dealing with a Christmas theme, but that was the first one. I never got any of the DC holiday specials or anything like that. But I got this in a random grouping that I pulled from a long box in a comic store, back issues. I had heard of it through Wizard, but never seen it, and I got it. And I said, oh, man, what do I have here? And the only odder depiction of Santa to this day I've ever seen in a comic was in the Ultimate Warriors comic, where he was in bondage gear.
Ooh, nice.
I was a few years older than Pat when I got this. I was probably 12 or 13 years old, but it's still a very fond part of my collection. I've pared back my collection quite a bit over the past few years just for storage purposes and being able to transport back and forth as I've moved.
Sure.
But I can say that this is a book that I don't intend to ever let go of just for the sheer novelty of it. They made Santa look like a legitimate tough guy when he pulls the combat knife and he's got the suspenders and the wife beater. He's ready to throw down with Lobo.
When he gets his eye knocked out, his next response is to yell, "Die, you naughty bastard."
Yeah.
Oh, it's classic. I don't know if I was a big fan of the art in here, but I think that's indicative of. I want to say is it Simon Beasley that does all of this art? I'm used to him doing. Okay, I don't know if I was the biggest fan of that, but regardless, I think this is one of those tales where I'm completely. I don't care. This is a fun story to read.
I think certain artists fit with certain characters. I think John Romita Jr. is a good example of that. John Romita Jr. drawing Superman or Captain America or Iron Man, it does nothing for me. Mm-hmm. John Romita Jr. drawing Spider-Man, I think fits and looks great. I think that Simon Beasley's sort of the same way. I don't want Simon Beasley drawing Booster Gold or The Incredible Hulk, but I think his very frenetic and exaggerated art style works with Lobo because of what Lobo is.
Yeah.
It's definitely a well-drawn book. I think it was J.M.D. Matisse who I was used to seeing Lobo drawn by more often than not. I could be wrong. But this, when I first saw it, this had some great visuals to it. Very, very rigid, tight lines, which were good for the narrative in place. Gavin brought up the example of John Romita Jr., whose art is not for every character, nor is it for every reader, but I happen to enjoy it quite a bit. This was a case of a particular artist pairing with someone perfectly.
Keith Giffen, for some reason, has always got a kind of a negative mark in my book because he did a comic called Trencher for Image. And the thing is that I believe he wrote and drew it. I do know for a fact it's his art. I just looked it up just to make sure. And I hated it. I hated the way that art looked. Have you ever heard of Trencher?
I remember it vaguely, but I did not read Image at all when it was first founded and during the first few years of the company.
Yeah, I remember the hype job from Wizard, but that's all I remember. I wasn't an avid Image reader, and the titles I did read were the more mainstream ones.
Here's a picture of Trencher #1 and how the art looked there. And it looks on the left-hand side, it looks like that's a Giffen drawing Lobo. But that is Giffen art. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, basically, it's what Image did for 90% of its stuff is steal the look from somebody else and just copy it.
And that was why I didn't read much of Image, because every time I looked at a cover, I thought, oh, well, that looks like Gambit, or that looks like Wolverine, or that looks like Batman, or that looks like Cable, or that looks like Deadpool.
I will give you the last words there, Pat, on Lobo Paramilitary Christmas Special.
Nothing like it before, nothing like it since. Definitely a worthwhile read for anybody who enjoys any level of irony or violence.
Agreed. All right, before we get into our Christmas special picks here that we've got to talk about, I threw this on the format here. I definitely don't want to leave it off because it's Christmas. It's the time for gift giving. We'll start with you, Gavin. Do you have any memories of any comic book related Christmassy gifts or things that you gave? Anything that ties those two together?
Actually, a couple. Probably in my teenage to adult years, the most memorable comic book type gift that I got for Christmas, I got a Sega Saturn with one of the games that I received with the Sega Saturn was Scud the Disposable Assassin. And if you've never read Scud the Disposable Assassin, it's a very tongue-in-cheek independent book from the 90s, and it's a lot of fun. The game probably isn't nearly as good as I remember it, but I was completely enthralled with the Sega Saturn. I loved every game that I had for it, so that sticks out to me a great deal. In terms of more mainstream comic book gifts, I remember a Christmas in particular. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. It was one of the big family Christmases at my grandmother's house. When I woke up on Christmas morning, Santa had left me pretty much the entire line of the Secret Wars figures. Every figure, every vehicle, every play set.
Secret Wars.
Marvel supervillains are coming.
Secret Wars.
Can the Marvel superheroes stop them? Marvel supervillains and superheroes figures, each sold separately. Here, Doctor Doom and the Doom Platoon, Magneto, Dr. Octopus. There, Captain America and the Champions of Freedom, Spider-Man and Wolverine. Secret Wars. The secret's out. Dr. Doom and Spider-Man, the Marvel Secret Wars collection. Other figures each sold separately. From Mattel.
And I remember breaking out the Doom roller and letting it just tear across the living room and putting together the little triple platform Captain America playset. It was one of the better Christmases as far as toys went, and I still remember very vividly opening all that up and having just an incredible time.
Nice. Now the sad question.
Okay.
Do you still have those figures and vehicles?
Actually, let's see. I still have Iron Man, Doctor Doom,
nice,
Daredevil, and the brown and yellow suit Wolverine, but his claws are long gone.
Oh yeah.
I think.
Well, they were attachable, right? Like that's what the gimmick was.
Yes. You could pop them on and off. So the claws are long gone. I still have the Doom Tower. I still have the Doom Roller, but it no longer rolls because the battery compartment ended up getting corroded and no longer a good connection there. But it still looks cool to display. So I probably have more of that than I deserve, but I don't have as much of it as I would like.
I've got to see what this Doom Tower looks like. Oh my gosh,
dude! It was incredible.
Dude,
it had an elevator. It had a cage. It had like a little throne room for Doom to surveil everything. It was just a fantastic playset.
Pat, you ever get any of the Secret Wars toys? Was that anything that you ever?
I had one because it was very rare and I wanted it, and that was Baron Zemo.
Oh wow! Now you said very rare. Was this rare because you couldn't find it in shops, or was this rare like way after when things started to become like on eBay and stuff?
To my understanding, both actually. I mean, I got the Baron Zemo toy in 1995. I want to say. But when the Secret Wars figures were released, the Baron Zemo one was not one of the wider released ones. I think Baron Zemo and Kang, if I'm not mistaken, were the two hardest to find.
Yeah. I can tell you, I'm looking at a picture. I don't know if you guys can see this picture right now, but there's I've never seen, I don't know who the blue and white figure behind Wolverine is. I don't know if you guys can see it or not. There's Baron Zemo up there. There's a blue.
Open that up a little bit.
I don't know if that's he looks like he's got a ski mask on almost. He's blue, white, and he's got red on him. That doesn't even look like a superhero. That's almost like a custom figure or something. That's weird looking. I can see Falcon, and I think that's Falcon in the back there behind Iron Man. Baron Zemo up there. We got Captain America, Magneto, Doc Ock, Dr. Doom, Daredevil, Black Costume Spider-Man, Hobgoblin, and then regular costume Spider-Man.
And the only ones of those that I did not have Hobgoblin, and I did not have Falcon. In fact, I've never seen Hobgoblin or Falcon in person. I don't know if they were just later released. I don't know if they're a European release. As far as who that is behind Wolverine, I honestly don't know.
I've never seen any. I've never seen a superhero like that. I mean, right above that we have, like on this picture, those are all superheroes I can mention. There's Kang. Yeah, I have no clue. Well,
yeah, I think the Constrictor was the only European release figure.
And I don't know what he looks like. Does he have white in his costume?
No, he has navy blue and orange mostly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So
hold on.
I'll see if I can figure that out. We've got Falcon, we've got Iceman, we've got Hobgoblin, we've got Electro, we've got Constrictor. I'm not seeing anything that looks like. I'm going to guess that is a custom figure. I found a better picture of him, but it doesn't help identify who he is. So I'm going to go to my resource on all things classic toys and see if Aaron Hickman can help us out.
He is the man. Aaron was actually a guest on this show last Christmas. We talked some Wishbooks, if I remember correctly. We actually did a YouTube video on Wishbooks. One of the most viewed YouTube videos. I don't do this stuff for YouTube at all, but that one went over pretty well. Aaron Hickman's the man. He knows if he don't know, he knows somebody that does.
Right.
That's a good thing. So, all right, let's move it on over to Pat. Pat Mullen, man, give us some comic book Christmas memories if you got it.
On Christmas of 1990, DC had just launched their second toy line after the Superpowers toy line. The Superpowers toy line was a lot of figures that you would either squeeze or whatever, and they could do a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those were great. Those were released in conjunction with the series, the animated series at the time. Well, they did a new Superpowers collection in 1990 to combat Marvel's Toy Biz run.
Batman's battle against crime never ends. And now you can bring the action home.
Batman, haha, you missed. Yeah, but I only missed once. You can't escape Joker. Just watch if you can. You won't be alone for long.
And in the Batcave,
No criminal can hide from Batman. Batman, gotta run to jail.
each item sold separately from Sharon Toy.
So I wound up getting a lot of the DC figures in that collection that year. I got a Flash that came with what was called the Turbo Pad that you could rear back and basically simulate him running on. And in addition, you could wind up a lever on his back and it would make his arms pump. Green Lantern came with a ring that had a squirt back to it where you could simulate that he was shooting a beam with his power ring. Joker had a very similar deal with a custom flower that squirted. So a lot of those toys I got that Christmas, which was really cool.
Did you happen to get the really cool Mr. Freeze that changed colors in the freezer?
I did actually, believe it or not.
It would just change colors, like from like white to blue or something?
Yep.
Yes.
But it was a really well-made figure. A lot of detail, probably the most detailed figure in that line, and was a really good-looking figure.
It was. It had really good articulation on the arms and legs. It was awesome for the time. But yeah, I got a lot of those toys. That was the big score of that year's Christmas. And the following year, it was answered back by Toy Biz's X-Men line, the initial launch of that. So I had some of the classics in that were a Juggernaut figure that basically had skates that would simulate him coming forward and being unstoppable.
That's awesome.
A Wolverine with a removable mask. And in addition, levers underneath his arms so that you could retract and put out his claws.
Jesse, if I can interrupt you real quick.
Absolutely.
It took Aaron 3 minutes to respond.
Not surprised.
He said that it's one of the Gulliver figures because the molds for the Secret Wars figures were used in a lot of other countries because they were cheap and easy to reproduce. So you basically had the same molds over and over that could just be quickly repainted for figures in countries like Brazil and things like that. And that's apparently what that is, that it's not actually a licensed Marvel character.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes a lot more sense because I was stumped. I knew we could rely on Aaron to come back with something. That's good. Good deal.
If you need to know something about toys, Aaron Hickman is without a doubt the guy.
So next topic. Our next topic, we're getting into it now. It's going to be the Christmas specials. I want to start with Gavin. You know, like I said, we haven't had the opportunity to do one for Halloween, so I'm going to give you the first go here on Christmas to kind of give us an idea of the comics that I guess you randomly received that we've got to cover here. These are all holiday specials, I believe, or somewhat related to Christmas in some way, shape, or form.
The three comics that I received by random draw were two Batman Christmas specials and a Justice League Christmas special. And I've made no mistake or no secret about the fact that I really don't care for Batman. I think DC's treatment of Batman, especially in recent years, is an excellent social commentary. The fact that they've made Batman the center of the universe when they have the greatest American legend ever created under their banner in Superman, I think is an incredible disservice to themselves and to the history of comic books. But it also reflects a lot of where we are in society, where the alpha male clean-cut, all-American patriot is looked down upon in favor of the dark and brooding kid that lives in a cave and only talks about how unfair the world is and what he can do to take vengeance and justice and so on and so forth. The older of the two Batman comics that I got to review was from the original Batman series, and I was a little confused as I was reading it first because it had nothing at all to do with Christmas. It was just this very hokey story about Bruce Wayne stopping hijackers on an airplane by using balloons to inflate his costume and make people think that Batman was there. It was really dumb. But there was a secondary story in the comic that featured Batman being signaled by Commissioner Gordon. And as he appears, he asks Commissioner Gordon, what's the problem? And Commissioner Gordon says, there is no problem. You've got the night off. It's a complete dick move by Commissioner Gordon to make Batman come out in the middle of the night to tell him that there's no problem. So Batman responds by singing Christmas carols with some local guys while in costume. And you get various 1 or 2 panel shots of people not committing crimes because it's Christmas. And that's about it. And it's everything that I hate about Batman. The other Batman issue that I got to review, I actually liked it much better than the older Batman comic because it was taken from Batman the Animated Series. You can have the debates about Keaton, Clooney, Kilmer, Bale, anybody else that's ever played Batman. The reality is Kevin Conroy is Batman. He has the voice, and I would venture to guess that any child that grew up in the 90s or anyone that has watched Batman the Animated Series, when they read a Batman comic book, they hear Kevin Conroy's voice. They don't think about Michael Keaton or Christian Bale or any of that. They think about Kevin Conroy. Kevin Conroy's inflection for Bruce Wayne and his tone of voice for Batman was perfect. It's iconic. There's a reason he keeps getting called back again and again to voice Batman. But this was a collection of very short stories involving different Batman villains, Clayface, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, the Joker, Mr. Freeze. Some were sad, some were funny, some were a little slapsticky. Just the fact that they were so short made it very difficult to really get into them with any type of depth. It was a very quick, very easy read, which makes sense because as far as I know, the Batman animated series comic book was geared towards younger readers. So no complaints with it. It just didn't hold up as well as the Justice League Christmas special that I drew.
All right, well then, so it was Justice League. Do you remember what the issue was? Because I went over the issue in the
not off the top of my head. I don't remember the issue number or the year. It was actually a really fun comic book and probably more than I expected from any of the Christmas specials.
Was it a more recent, like 90s one?
Yeah. It was probably late 90s, early 2000 because Plastic Man was one of the central characters. And I want to say late 90s, early 2000s, right before they did, I think he was in the JLA. I think he was part of the team that was right before the reboot that they did with Brad Meltzer when they did that incredible storyline with Red Tornado and Solomon Grundy and all of that. I think Plastic Man was on the team just before the Brad Meltzer, Ed Benes run.
Okay. So, well then, I guess tell me why you like this one. Out of your 3 that you got, why'd this one win?
It was Plastic Man telling a story to a weird kid from a weird family about Santa Claus and how he knew that Santa Claus was real and Santa Claus was not lame because Santa Claus was in fact a part of the Justice League. And Plastic Man was clearly making things up as he went along as he told this story about Neron the Demon trapping the Justice League and Santa Claus as a part of a plot to destroy all of the goodwill in the world. And Neron is, if you're not familiar with DC lore and the villains there, DC makes use of demons and angelic figures, I feel like, a lot more than Marvel or than Marvel does. Mm-hmm. Because with DC, you have Trigon, which is the sort of the ultimate Teen Titans villain, and you have Asmodeus, which is an angelic figure that has been used. I think there was an angel that was actually a member of the Justice League for a time. And then you have Neron,
And Neron's whole shtick is he likes to make deals. And it's always deals that end poorly for the other person, but he's a demon. And so he's tricking kids into getting the Christmas presents they want. But to get them, they have to do bad things. And it's not like super malicious things like kill your parents. It's like, little Sally can have the toy that she wants for Christmas. All she has to do is break her brother's piggy bank to get the money out and go buy it herself. And so he's tricking kids all over the world into doing this. And as they take the deals and engage in this malicious behavior, he becomes stronger and stronger.
Okay.
And so the Justice League goes to rescue Santa Claus. But because of all of the evil that children are doing all over the world, Neron has become far too powerful for the Justice League to fight. And it's up to Santa Claus to save the day. And Santa Claus saves the day by breaking loose from his prison. And he offers Neron a present free of charge. No exchange, no bargain, no tricks. Just, Neron, even though you're a demon, even though you're on the naughty list, you're still entitled to something.
Uh-huh.
And so Santa hands over this package to Neron. Neron has no choice but to accept it. But because there was no actual exchange, it was just a willful gift, it robs Neron of all of his power, and Santa saves the day and is given honorary membership into the Justice League.
Nice. So Santa Claus... Now, hold on. This is a story that Plastic Man is telling, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, is it complete fiction that Santa Claus? Okay. So Santa Claus is, by canon, is not a member of the JLA.
Correct. The kid is of the opinion that Santa Claus is lame, that the Justice League is cool because they have Superman and Batman. Santa's lame because he doesn't do anything but give presents. and Plastic Man is trying to tell this kid a bedtime story so he'll go to sleep. Santa Claus can show up and deliver gifts, but at the same time also trying to convince the kid that Santa is not lame.
Yeah,
because he's a part of the Justice League as well.
He freaking saved him. He saved the Justice League. Come on, kid.
And at the end of the issue, as the kid looks out the window and Plastic Man is with him, Santa Claus is actually outside the window, and Plastic Man is caught completely off guard. Holy cow, like, how is this happening? Because Plastic Man just made this whole story up. And so the kid jumps in bed and is pretty much like, all right, dude, you got to get out of here. I got to go to sleep. Santa's here. And Plastic Man's like, well, okay. And so Plastic Man leaves and he's confused and trying to figure out what's going on. And the last page of the comic is you figure out where Santa Claus came from. Plastic Man's communication device on his belt had been broadcasting to other members of the League accidentally.
Oh, nice.
So Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter pick up on where he's at and what he's doing. So Martian Manhunter uses his shape-shifting abilities to become Santa Claus. Green Lantern creates a sleigh and reindeer.
Oh, wow.
And that's who they see. And they say, well, how long do you think it'll take him to figure it out? And Martian Manhunter says, well, elongated man would take about 2 minutes. So we'll say about 15 minutes for Plas.
I need to look into some elongated man and Plastic Man stuff. Can you? I mean, you probably know more about it than I do. What are the? Obviously, they're two different people. Ralph Dibny. Yes. Ralph Dibny is Plastic Man, right?
No, Ralph Dibny is elongated man.
Okay, all right. So then, Plastic Man. What's his deal? I mean, is he like?
He's weird.
Okay.
I'm honestly not as familiar with Plastic Man as I am with Elongated Man. My introduction to Plastic Man was probably the same as a lot of 80s kids. He had a figure in the DC Superpowers line where if you squeezed his legs together, his neck would pop up really high. And I mean, that was pretty much it. He could stretch and okay, that's Plastic Man. He for a kid that didn't know any better, he was DC's answer to Mr. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you get into the character, obviously he is not Reed Richards. He is not a scientist. He's not an intellectual. He's not a team leader. At times been portrayed as having a very tenuous grasp on reality, never very serious. He's always a joke character. Even when he is needed to be serious, it still comes with some witty banter. Elongated Man has a lot of the same power set as far as the malleability, the stretching, things like that. he operates more as a Batman type character in that he is a detective. And
Yeah.
it's been pretty well established in the DC universe that Elongated Man is probably the second best detective in the Marvel universe. There have been times when Batman has gone to him for help with things, to get his take on things when he's been particularly stumped. Probably the definitive Elongated Man story is Identity Crisis.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Which is, just a tragic tale, very well done, has become a big part of canon in the DC universe for multiple characters. But if you enjoy some of the more hard-boiled crime stories and that type of detective work, then Elongated Man's a character that you'll probably enjoy. I will say that Plastic Man looks to be getting at least a temporary spotlight in the DC universe because he's playing somewhat of a role in the metal event that they're doing now.
Is he?
And I've been out of touch with comics for a few years. I don't know how we got to this point, but I do know that Plastic Man is currently trapped in the shape of an egg. He cannot communicate. He cannot speak. He cannot change forms. But whenever he gets near the nth metal, he begins to vibrate, and he acts almost as a tuning fork or a compass for nth metal, which is the focal point of the metal miniseries that they're doing.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about that series.
And I don't know, how we get from point A to point B, but one of the series that's launching, and I don't think this is a spoiler because DC's advertising it pretty heavily, is a team book that looks to be filling the void left by the absence of a Marvel Fantastic Four book called The Terrifics, which is Mr. Terrific, Plastic Man, Metamorpho, and a female character that I'm not familiar with, and I don't know her name, but they go on these very offbeat adventures with a little bit of a science tilt to them because of Mr. Terrific and Metamorpho, and it looks to be done in that very 1960s Kirby-esque Fantastic Four vein, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm curious to see how we get from Plastic Man being trapped as an egg to the Terrifics book.
Absolutely. So is that where they leave it on that issue? Is just a Martian Manhunter and Green Lantern laughing at poor old Plastic Man?
Yep, that's it. Well, actually, no. The last line of the book comes from Santa Claus, because there is an actual Santa Claus watching all of this unfold. And in the story that Plastic Man told, Santa Claus had heat vision for some reason. And as Santa is going through his bag of toys, he's talking to one of the reindeers, and he says, "Heat vision? Really? Where do they get these ideas?"
Wonderful.
This is some of what Gavin described is going to be par for the course with some of these stories that we break down, just to let people know. The stuff I got was a little bit different, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I agree with him on a lot of the sentiment of Batman in terms of both the negative and positive. Realistically, Batman the Animated Series and Kevin Conroy is the definitive Batman for an entire generation. A lot of, unfortunately, the focus that's been thrown on Batman is reflective of a very piss-poor attitude in a lot of people. The 3 issues I got were basically a little bit weird. I got DC Universe Holiday Bash number 3, and all of these issues are basically several collected mini-stories.
Okay.
So I'm going to go real brief through what I think are the high points of the 2 issues that I thought were the runners-up, without going through every story.
Sounds great.
So DC Holiday Bash number 3, that came out in 1999. The stories involved here, there's a real quick Joker's 12 Days of Christmas rendition, which you can imagine how that goes. Wonder Woman and Artemis kind of bringing up their holiday traditions. Tim Drake as Robin, thinking he's alone for the holiday, only to be surprised by Nightwing, Oracle, and Batman. An old Bat Lash story that isn't very good. An Impulse story that's really meant for a very young audience about the lesson of Santa. And the one good story in here is a World's Finest story with Batman and Superman. In Smallville, they find the Toy Man with a Captain Action figure on a rampage. And it makes Superman think of a year when Ma and Pa Kent couldn't really afford to get him anything other than just the base Captain Action figure without any of the accessories or other figures. And he was just so darn happy to get it, it didn't matter. So this family that the Toyman's attacking with this Captain Action that Batman and Superman stop, you find out that it was a machination of the Toyman because this guy was working with the Toyman at one point to develop a new toy, got accused of stealing the idea, so Toyman sought vengeance. Unfortunately, nobody bought the toy idea, and the house was destroyed as a result. So Christmas is looking pretty grim for this family, and Superman says, well, we got to do something to fix this. And Batman goes, nobody got hurt, the boy's fine, and we got Toyman. Everything's fine. And just looks to move on. Superman, being Superman, of course, gets the lumber, rebuilds their house in as soon as the time he can, and apologizes to them about how tough this is going to be, and takes the Captain Action figure that he had as a kid from Ma and Pa's house and gives it to the kid from the family. Alfred, moments later, drives up and gives the family a business card from Bruce Wayne and understands that this guy has come up with this new toy idea that they want to fund and give to some needy children around the world, and drops off the newest version of Captain Action for the kid. So kind of a cool little story, but really nothing else in there that I found particularly all that enjoyable. The other comic that would be on my runner-up list is the DC Superstar Holiday Special, issue 21. And we've got 6 stories in here, one featuring Jonah Hex saving a young deer from being slaughtered and getting a family their Christmas dinner. The folks from House of Mystery arguing over the meaning of Christmas. A somewhat decent Batman story about a former criminal turned good working as a department store Santa who gets strong-armed into a robbery situation. Sergeant Rock and Easy Company trying to protect the shrine of Santa Maria on Christmas Eve during World War II.
Ooh, that sounds like it might be interesting.
They accidentally end up destroying it.
Oh, no.
Spoiler alert. And, you know, some of the young Italian citizens are cursing at them, but then the nuns who organize the mission trip to go show them that in the sky there's this star right over where Bethlehem is. And the next story kind of rips it off. It takes place with the Legion of Superheroes and Superboy in the 30th century, with Superboy trying to show the Legion the star, and they map the coordinates. They don't get there. Of course, they have some adventures along the way with a race that's fighting with each other, and by the time they break it up, it's Christmas Eve, and all of a sudden, the star appears.
Oh. Now, I'm looking through here. I'm just kind of perusing through the comic. I see the Jonah Hex one, and is the star, the Christmas star, a central theme through all these books, or is it just those couple that you've seen?
They loosely tie it together. It's not. It doesn't really play a factor in the Batman story. It's more, I think, a case of they use it heavily in Sergeant Rock, and obviously with that being a flashback to World War II, and Superboy and the Legion because it takes place in the 30th century.
Yeah. Also,
none of that would be allowed today.
The war on Christmas continues. So those are your 2 runners-up. So now, did you give us your winner already? You didn't, did you?
I did not name the best issue I had. The best issue I had, and really on the strength of one story, is Christmas with the Superheroes #2 from 1989.
Well, throwing a little tidbit about Toyman. First of all, what a perfect Christmas villain for any Christmas issue you ever want to do in DC.
No kidding.
But Toyman's also probably at the center of my favorite DC one-shot book ever. It was a Superman a Batman book, I believe, and it's Toyman. He's monologuing about how Superman is the greatest hero of them all, and it's almost this very perverse hero worship. And eventually, the point of view switches so that you can see that Toyman is speaking to a very frightened child, because he knows that by kidnapping and torturing a child, he'll get Superman's attention. And then the next thing that happens is the wall of the building that he's in comes crashing down. Toyman is just giddy. I told you he would come. Through the wall comes Batman.
Oh.
It's a joint venture. Superman has taken down the wall, but Batman goes in and does the dirty work of rounding up Toyman. As Batman is dragging Toyman off to Arkham, Toyman's screaming, "No, you can't do this. I'm one of his. Not yours. I'm one of his." And it's just a very dark, twisted book that DC threw in to fill in a spot where the writers and artists had gotten behind schedule. A book was delayed, so they threw in a one-shot story to kill time in between. And it really stuck with me because they did a very good job with the pacing of the book and really establishing Toyman as an incredibly creepy human being.
Wow. A writer can take their time and dive into a character and give them the levels that they need. Like some are just so, especially a lot of early characters in DC history, they're just so shallow. There's that one thing, whether it be a Batman villain who's just trying to do a heist like the Penguin or something like that. But it's when you dive into the psychology of a villain, that's when I agree it gets 100 times more interesting. All right, Pat. So Christmas with the Superheroes #2 from 1989. What do we got going on?
Again, several stories collected, about 8 pages each. The first details, and it's probably the best story in there. Superman, believe it or not, happens to fly by this man who is stuck on an icy road in the middle of nowhere where no one is stopping. He's freezing. Car won't start. He's in trouble. Eventually, he's at the point where he's contemplating suicide. He has a gun in the car, and he's writing out a note. Superman swoops in and asks, "Hey, you mind if I come in and sit with you?" And offers to warm the guy up with his heat vision, takes a look at his car and figures out what's wrong with it. And he says, "Well, what's with the gun?" And the guy tells him, "I've been here for over 4 hours and nobody would stop and they just speed on by and I'm in so much pain." Superman basically tells him, it's not out of lack of understanding. Where he's placed on the road, you can't see him too well until you already hit a curve. And because the road's frozen, you can't stop suddenly or you might kill yourself. So, and he tells the guy, he goes, that is what it is, but that's a thin excuse for you nearly taking your life. And he tries to talk to him about, don't you have family or, don't you have anything? And the guy tells him basically his wife just left him and he helped her move out and he's a long way out from anything meaningful and on Christmas of all days. So he's really upset and just distraught. Superman basically finds pills next and thinks the guy's going to kill himself with pills. And then he finds out he has a disease where the skin and muscles degenerate. He just doesn't know what he's trying to do. He's supposed to go to a house that he's trying to sell. He has no other family other than the wife and the daughter he hasn't spoken to in years. Superman's like, "Well, why don't you call?" And he says, "One thing I do know is someone who has lost their parents, they'd give anything to have him back." He just tries to convince him to call. The guy's starting to think about it, and he doesn't have anywhere else to go. So he starts the car, gives him directions from where he's at to a house where he's pretty sure they'll have somebody there. And once he gives his word, he doesn't break it. So he goes, "I just want you to go see these people, and you'll have a nice warm bed and plate." The next thing you see is a guy taking him seriously and pulls off on a sign that says, "Now entering Smallville." And it reminded me of the real high points of when J. Michael Straczynski was writing Superman not too long ago during the Grounded storyline.
I'm looking through this as we go through it. The art's not great, but you can see the emotion on both Superman and this random guy's face, how depressed and distraught he looks. It's very sad and sombering. Is that a word, sombering? I'm going to put it out there.
It is now.
I made it a word. But yeah, it looks, and I can see why Superman flies off. He breaks the gun. That's a deep story right there. Wow.
And again, I think the best Superman stories are the ones that are more about the man than the super, and detail that, this guy does have this plethora of powers and all this stuff, but really the biggest power he's got is his heart and his understanding. Because besides all that, he's still a regular person and still can get in touch with people and just help them as much as he can without the powers. And I enjoy that. Next up is a very forgettable Edgar Allan Poe-esque poem dealing with Batman and the dark. And it's not well drawn to me. It's kind of completely passable. The next story we get to is a Wonder Woman story that deals with a female pastor from a church who meets her, who's kind of given up on stuff because she lost the congregation and she's waiting for another one and she's about to give up on her faith. And she has a discussion with Wonder Woman, who of course is from the Greek god pantheon. They basically come to a common ground about love and peace being the bottom line of what each of them want. There's a discussion about letting love and peace be your God. She's going to tough it out and wait to try to find a new congregation. And if you think the Superman story is a little bit preachy, I ain't got nothing on that Wonder Woman story, which I think is really worth skipping. It's not well done for a message that's trying to convey itself as Christian. It doesn't really understand how Christianity works. So I would skip it. The second awesome story in this book has no words.
Oh, my goodness.
It's written and penciled by the legendary John Byrne, and it features a character who's severely underappreciated named Enemy Ace, who is Hans von Hammer, who was a German pilot in World War I and II, who is an anti-hero because he has to serve his nation, but he does so against the cost of his conscience, and oftentimes helps the Allies under the guise of subterfuge.
Okay.
And so we have a VA hospital where you have several people who've been either shot down or injured, and the nurses are trying to help. And you see one guy with a picture that he's drawn of Enemy Ace's plane. And another guy who is a German who lost a leg swats it away and yells at him. They've gone 14 days without supplies until Enemy Ace drops in. And he's got bundles of supplies to give to the Allied forces and food and everything. And he sees this nurse that he's hooked up with and starts dancing. And then all of a sudden, he looks at the names of the fallen and salutes them. And a guy who's been shot down pulls a gun on him. Same guy who drew the picture, waiting for his chance. And this guy who had swatted the picture away swats the gun away. And Enemy Ace offers him a handshake, but the guy tells him just to go. And Enemy Ace flies off. And it's got no words, but the panels speak volumes. It's really, really excellent and worth checking out. The next story on our journey is a personal favorite because it involves my favorite super friendship in the DC universe, Hal Jordan and Barry Allen. Green Lantern and Flash are on monitor duty in the Watchtower. They basically have nothing to do, so they go down to Earth to patrol. They run into this millionaire who is about to say screw it, close his factory, give up on everything because he thinks there's nobody with Christmas spirit. So they challenge him to be Santa Claus for a night and use his money to go through everybody and drop off presents. So with Flash using his speed and Green Lantern using his ring to make a sled, they basically turn this guy into Santa Claus. And they think they've gotten everything, except they come across one family that they missed before 6 a.m., which was the goal. So they just like, well, we failed. We give up. Too bad. Go ahead and get rid of everything and go off yourself. It's fine. Guys like, wait, what? And so he looks at where this family was supposed to be, and there's just a burnt-out shack. And he sees a car nearby, and he knocks on it. And that's the family. They're living out of their car now because they lost their house, and they don't have any money and for gifts. The father basically found an artificial flower that he can give to his wife so it won't die. Sardines for his daughter because she likes sardines. And this guy's so moved that he takes them down to the shelter down the road and decides that a couple of the people he's met that night he wants to bring there too. And he just divides up a ton of money and presents and jobs between them. And last but not least, there is a story featuring one of my favorite characters, Deadman. Unfortunately, this story is very blah.
Aww.
Boston is floating through, watching everybody getting ready for Christmas. He doesn't have a lot to do then because there's not a lot of vengeance to be had and murders to be investigated. So he ends up taking over a guy's body just to experience Christmas again with a family. And he leaves, and then he gets really pissed off in that he doesn't understand, like, all the work he's doing, is this what it's for, just so he can be tortured and not ever, get anything back, Rama? And he's really upset. He meets somebody named Karma. Karma basically calls him out on it. You're only doing this for recognition? What are you talking about here? And he's like, well, you can understand I used to be in show business and blah, blah, blah. And she basically points out what a selfish prick he's being. He kind of just accepts it and is like, yep, you're right. Hey, where'd you go? And I guess you're supposed to interpret that it was either an angel or something else, but it's not really well put together. But the Superman story, the Enemy Ace story, and the Flash and the Green Lantern story all get a big thumbs up from me.
All right. Well, both you guys have gone above and beyond what you needed to do. Originally, the list itself, it would pick out one story amongst all the stories in that issue. So the only expectation I had was for you guys to actually just read that one story. So I don't know if you guys were cussing me because you thought you had to read all 900 pages of these specials, because there was some of these things were pushing like 30 to 40 pages if I remember right. Regardless, I'm glad you guys took it upon yourselves and brought your opinions to source material. So on my end, I guess it's going to look like I slacked off a little bit because I only covered the one story that the list had. So I got 3 books, all right? Excuse me, 3 stories out of these books. The first one that I'm going to talk about here is, I'm going to go with The Night the Mob Stole Christmas. All right. This is a Brave and the Bold issue number 148 from 1979, written by Bob Haney, not a name that I recognize, art by Joe Staton, and Jim Aparo. So this is Batman and Plastic Man teaming up, and apparently there has been a butt legging. Have you ever heard of that term, butt legging? Yes. There's been a butt legging operation running through Gotham, and it's I've also heard it's termed in this book as butt smuggling. So I just want to let you guys know that it's actually dealing with cigarettes. Okay, it's apparently if you go down below the border, you can grab cigarettes nice and cheap, and then you can slap these tax stamps on them or whatever. This is 1979, so I don't know.
That's what the fat guy in New York ended up dying over because he was selling Lucy's. And
yeah, he was butt legging.
Yeah, he was butt smuggling, and the cops decided to slam him on the ground and persecute him for having asthma or something.
Oh my goodness! Well, so this is a whole big operation where these guys are bringing in these cigarettes, and it's illegal. So Batman and Plastic.
Jesse, I hate to keep interrupting you, but
no, you're all right, man.
You think Dino Bravo had anything to do with this?
Only if there are 2 exit wounds from behind the skull.
Gotcha.
Now that's a reference. There are wrestling references, and then there are wrestling references. Tell me, please explain to me what happened. What did Dino Bravo do? Is he a convicted murderer now? I know who Dino Bravo is.
Dino Bravo got involved with the Canadian black market for cigarettes and tried to double cross the mob and paid for it dearly.
Yeah, his father-in-law was a very well-to-do man with the mafia in Montreal. He crossed them, and they crossed up behind his head with 2 pistols.
So he's dead
since 1993.
I had no idea. Was that at the height of I know he was. What was he like?
Oh no, it was well after his peak
run. Okay, so then I remember Dino in the WWF.
All right, Bravo is back down to the bench as he attempts to bench press 655 pounds. All right, 655 pounds. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, luckily, nothing as grim as that happens here. It's just the mob's involved. Batman and Plastic Man have to try and figure out how to stop this butt-legging ring that's going through Gotham. Their mission takes them through the snowy Gotham streets, which, by the way, Batman has no problem just driving around the Batmobile while people are Christmas shopping. That happens quite often, apparently. People are just like, hey, it's a Batmobile. All right, keep going. But yeah, so he's out in the snowy streets there through Gotham, and then they decide to follow these mob guys down to Conch Key, Florida, where they end up actually being captured and are smack in the middle of a mob boss by the name of Big Jake and his plan to take out a rival family. That's like this big double cross. Luckily, they escape. Batman and Plastic Man are able to stop the double cross just as the crap hits the fan. Returning the criminals to Gotham, the pair put the goons to work during Christmas, replacing the ever-popular Lacey's display that the mob had stolen earlier. As to why in the world they did this, I have no idea. But for some reason, they stole a whole storefront. That was a wrong that had to be righted. And Batman and Plastic Man, the logic on this story for 1979, I'll tell you right now, the art was great. I really liked it, but I mean, come on. I don't know why this made the list, but whatever. So
who had the art in that one?
Joe Staton and Jim Aparo.
Okay.
So, I mean, there were some panels that looked way more dynamic than this other story I'm about to read, but the story itself just was really lacking. So that's why that's why it's number 3 in my list of 3. But yeah, so the Lacey's display is being put back together by these captured mob goons, and the issue ends with Plastic Man bending himself into the shape of Merry Christmas, while the mayor thanks Batman for his efforts. great. Everything is good in Gotham. So
Comic books were stupid.
1979. I don't know. Bob Haney, I would have to go. I swear I've heard that name before, but for the life of me, it must not have been something that I read and been like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get a hold of this guy again.
He sounds like an air conditioner salesman.
There were a couple instances I shared with you guys online out of the story. One was the overuse. Well, I should say it was only used 3 times, but it was in some of the oddest places of the word check. Like, I got a quote here. It says, I think Plastic Man says, I still don't want those hijack hyenas to know who I am. It could pay off later. And then Batman goes, check. All right. Well, I understand that as an affirmative. But the thing is that Batman used it twice, and then a mob goon, just some random, maybe it was Big Jake, I don't know, but just some random mob guy used the word check as well. So I don't know if that was just common parlance in the late 70s. I have no idea. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. There's my top hits off of the worst of the 3. Brave and the Bold, again, Brave and the Bold, number 148, 1979. Now let's talk about my number 2 on this list. The number 2 on this list, I think, is the longest story. It is titled The Sealmen's War on Santa Claus. Okay. Now, Gavin, Pat, you ever heard of the evil sealmen of DC?
I can't say that I have.
Yeah, neither could I. Pat?
I must have been drunk as Cooter Brown if I ever did. And I didn't know Cooter Brown, and I never saw him that drunk.
All right, then. I'll take that as a negative. This comes out of Christmas with the Superheroes, number 4, from 1982. The script is by a name that I've heard of before, Michael Fleischer, and art by, you heard of this name, Jack Kirby and Mike Royer. So
interesting.
Yeah. And there's another name you're going to hear about, which is one of the main characters' name. A name I haven't heard in a while. A young boy by the name of Jed. Yes, Jed. Not that Jed. Not the Casual Heroes Jed. No, this is Jed, who is a friend of the superhero by the name of Sandman. Now, Jed has been tasked by his mother to visit the wealthy Titus Gotrox and request a donation for some type of charity fund. Upon arriving, Jed requests a donation, but Titus refuses, and the conversation somehow turns to Jed's belief in Santa Claus. Titus tells Jed that if he can bring Santa to his house by midnight, then he will donate $1 million to this charity. Jed's plan is to enlist his friend Sandman in finding Santa. Problem is, Mr. Gotrox's nephew overhears everything and worries that his inheritance may actually be in danger once his uncle Titus passes away. And there's no way that this kid, Jed, is going to be giving $1 million of his hard-earned money to charity. So he follows Jed to attempt to foil his plan. After some time, Jed and Sandman find Mrs. Claus, who tells her how the Sealmen have taken Santa prisoner and intend on sabotaging Christmas. Determined to rescue Santa and save Christmas, our pair of heroes find Santa and battle the Sealmen. Finally, the leader of the Sealmen explains why they had done this. Now get this. This is the most villainous reason as to why to kidnap Santa Claus. Okay? They had been upset because the gifts that they have been given the past few years, no real Sealman needs. Things such as galoshes. They don't need galoshes. They're sealmen. Fishing rods. They could go down into the ocean and grab a seal with no problem. These are actually seal/men, by the way. Woolen gloves that have fingers, and these poor guys have webbed hands. Yes, that has made the leader of the Sealmen very mad. And it is time to exact their vengeance and ruin everybody's Christmas here. So,
or in other words, enough is enough, and it's time for a change.
Somebody hit the music. I might just edit that in there. You never know. Explaining that there must have been a grievous error over the past few years. The leader of the Sealmen actually understands their explanations and decides to let Santa, Sandman, and Jed go. Now, returning to the North Pole, because Christmas has got to get underway, all right? Returning to the North Pole, they find Mrs. Claus tied to the chair. The culprit? That's right, Titus Gotrox's nephew. His plan to thwart Jed's gambit of bringing Titus, his uncle Titus, Santa Claus, is soon defeated, and the nephew is shoved down Titus's chimney with Santa following behind just at the stroke of midnight. So as Titus sits there and sees his nephew who is tied up, and Santa Claus stands before him, He's kind of speechless. Santa explains that Jed held up his end of the bargain and brought Santa to Titus, and it's time for Titus to follow through and write that check. But what Titus tells Santa is shortly after Jed left, the check was written, and there was going to be a $1 million donation no matter what the outcome. So there you go. There's your, I think this came out of, like I said, Christmas with the Superheroes number 4 from 1982. Okay, number 1, Jack Kirby art. All right. I'm somewhat of a fan. It's fun to, read and look at what such a legend has done. In the 80s, I mean, this guy had, I think he still had 30, or close to 30 years under his belt. Maybe 20 or 30 years under his belt for drawing comics. So that was neat to be able to see that. I can't say there was anything spectacular. We're not getting the great Dark Side or anything like that coming from Jack Kirby's hand. This is Santa Claus and Sandman, and fun to see his art in this book. The story was neat. I mean, we got Santa Claus who, he's captured by the Sealmen. I have no idea who the Sealmen are, but I have some strange feeling this might be the last time we ever see the Sealmen, I would assume. Then again, I could hop onto the wiki and there could be like 20 stories written about the Sealmen. What did you expect? It was going to be an overbearing rich guy who was not going to donate anything to anybody, and that was not the case. Instead, at the end of the story, this man had a generous heart after all, and Santa or no Santa, he was going to donate to charity.
I'll be honest, that sounds awful.
All right. Well, that's number 2 on my list, Gavin. Let me tell you what number 1 was. Okay. Now I kind of took a look over the list before I assigned things out. Not in the fact that I rigged it or anything, but I knew what stories were what, sort of. Okay. And I was really hoping I would get this one. This next story came out of DC Holiday Bash 1998 special. All right. This is the DC Holiday Bash 2. Now, there was one story. This thing had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories in it, 8 or 9 stories in it, 47 pages. So this story was titled Present Tense. Okay.
I get it.
And I was all excited. I'm like, oh man, it's going to be some great time travel stuff, something like that. But what I noticed was present tense started on page 18 and the next story started on page 20. This story is only 2 pages long, but this was a great story. All right. Told in 2 pages. We are taken to the great, the horrible world, the terrible world of Apocalypse, where Dark Side is ruling, and the alarms are going off everywhere. Dark Side is beside himself. He's telling his minions, make sure you guys need to track this guy. He can't get in here. After everybody's flipping buttons and everything, trying to put up these, the defenses or whatever. Unfortunately, this unknown attacker makes his way into the same room that Darkseid is in. And sure enough, it's Santa Claus. So Santa Claus walks up to Darkseid, looks him in the face, and pretty much pulls out his list. And he goes, nope, naughty again. Gives him a lump of coal, turns around, and walks away. Darkseid looks at everybody in the room and says, kill him. Santa, of course, runs off, and as everybody's shooting him, every year, apparently, this happens. He just keeps showing up, giving Darkseid coal, and then leaving. That was the end of the story. It's just Santa showing up and giving Darkseid his present. So I love that one. Written by, according to this, it was Ty Templeton, writer and artist. So this came out in the late 90s, 1998. That definitely gets my top award of my 3. So Pat, how would you like to send this holiday special of source material out? What's your last words?
Well, this has been a particularly sad episode of source material.
Get your tissues.
These
stories suck.
I think the lesson that we've all learned here is that don't tell stories about Christmas.
It's kind of tough to incorporate a good story among superheroes in Santa Claus. It's got to be tough.
The only real actual good true Christmas story I've ever seen. And it's funny we bring it up because, Jesse, you and I did the Superman versus Doomsday fight and Death of Superman.
Yeah.
When we get to World Without a Superman, there's that one issue, and I think it's of Action Comics, where everybody in the Justice League does Superman's Christmas duty, which is he would go to the post office in Metropolis and read every letter that children sent to him and try to do as many things for them as he could on Christmas. So they all kind of pitch in and take the turns to do it. And that's like the only good Christmas story that was a full issue's worth of it that I think I've ever read. And maybe learn not to make these stories because most of them aren't good.
Gavin?
I'm glad that we got to reference a couple of dead Canadians in this episode.
Check it off the list.
If you don't take anything else away from tonight's episode of source material, remember that butt licking or whatever they were doing in Batman will get you killed by the Canadian mob. That's the more you know tonight. That's knowing is half the battle. I think when you look at Christmas specials in comics, they're generally kind of hokey. They're usually not very well done. They're usually done by writers and artists that are filling in for the actual writers and artists that have been given a month off for Christmas. If you're going to read a Christmas special, just read the Lobo Paramilitary Christmas special. You'll enjoy it more than anything else that's out there.
Absolutely. Well, I can't thank both of you boys enough for coming on here and suffering through. Like I said, you guys put in some work, and I owe these guys a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, I've tried to have these guys on before, and then we were going to do something with the Legion. That got postponed. Look forward at some point, hopefully here in 2018, we'll be doing, what was it called, Pat?
The Great Darkness Saga.
Here we go. Oh, goodness. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gavin. You got anything to plug, dude?
Yeah, I actually want to announce that after a long hiatus, beginning in January of 2018, I know a lot of you, and when I say a lot of you, maybe a half dozen or so, have actually been waiting for this announcement. So it is my pleasure to let you know that the Casual Heroes will be continuing their hiatus in 2018. We have absolutely nothing planned.
Consistency. That's what I love about you guys.
That's all I've got. I don't know what else Pat wants to plug. I mean, he's got maybe some karaoke appearances or something coming up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's hear some plugs, man. What do you got to talk about?
Well, I've been on a little bit of a hiatus as of late, but you can more often than not hear me on Sundays on the 411 Ground and Pound radio show right here on the Rattlechen Broadcasting Network that airs Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Upcoming, we have a TV party with myself and Mark Rattlich to review Season 3B of Fuller House, the Netflix exclusive sequel to Full House. That is the show is dropping on the 22nd of this month, just a few days away. We will be recording 2 days after that, so look forward to that. In 2018, there will be more TV parties involving me. You can also listen to a recent episode of the Metal Hammer of Doom that featured myself and Jesse, where we look back fondly on the album that started off the Poison craze. Look what the cat dragged in. I've been all over the place, folks. It's pretty hard not to find me. So go ahead and look. I'll be there.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish y'all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I don't know if we'll have a show before the New Year, so we'll put both of those in there. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I want to thank Gavin Napier. I want to thank Patrick Mullen for coming on here, talking some Christmas comics with me. DC, nonetheless. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of here. Have a good one.
That's fit to give the king a rum-pum-pum-pum, rum-pum-pum-pum, rum-pum-pum-pum.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.